Call this meeting to order of the Mayor and Commissioners of the Town of Rising Sun, September 13th, 2022 at 7:14 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Pauline Braun.
Here.
Dave Warnick.
Here.
Augie Pearson.
Here.
Mayor should be joining us in a few minutes, hopefully. With that, if we can have the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I guess I'm just gonna have a moment of silence for, the family that was tragically killed in Elk Mills this week, or last week, I guess it was, and the first responders and others in harm's way. Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, since you have arrived, would you like to take over? We didn't get very far.
Sorry for my absence.
We
Let's
only
go
got through
ahead,
the moment of silence, if you like.
move into business meeting items. Annexation agreement, 881 Telegraph Road. Do you have that, Town Administrator?
Yes, I do. And, Mayor, I just wanted to say up front, as you can see, we have a lot of things on our agenda. In between the town attorney and I will be bouncing responsibility back and forth. What you have in front of you is an annexation agreement for 881 Telegraph Road. That is the main property for Southern States. This is part of the process of extending water out to the Southern States properties. Something that we've been working on now, dating all the way back to 2010. This is the next step in the process. Town Attorney, I'm not sure, is there anything that you wanted to add or any kind of additional overview to that?
No, I think that's it. You should get into the details.
So this is an annexation agreement that we've been emailing the board on for the last couple of days and working very diligently, especially over the last, I'd say, 2.5 weeks to get this document ready to go. This is one of the state requirements for annexing a property is to have an annexation agreement. So essentially what this is, it comes down to, Town Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just something that they make a motion and vote on. It's not something that has to be read into the minutes.
That's right. I mean, as this isn't unfamiliar with what we've done in the past, the annexation agreement basically says that the applicant is agreeing to do this and the terms in general of what they're agreeing to do to bring in their property. And so it's like any other contract that you're going to approve. It does not create an annexation. It does not really even start the annexation process, but it is the agreement that is going to be the foundation for it. When you read it, you'll see there's some other agreements that still need to be worked out. So we've talked about this for 10 plus years. This is now step one in the execution. So you just make a motion.
All right,
vote,
can I get a
step one.
motion to approve, annexation resolution 2022-18A, annexation of
Mr. Mayor, we're not doing the
That's the
resolution,
resolution,
it's
just
just
the
the
agreement.
annexation agreement.
Okay. So can I get a motion to approve that agreement?
I make a motion that we. Paul?
No, go ahead.
No, go.
All right, I'm gonna start over. I make a motion that we accept the annexation agreement between the town and Southern States Cooperative.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Obviously, there's a lot of information here. Anyone have any questions? We've all reviewed the agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Town Administrator?
The next item we would go into, because of the sequence of how these things fall in the line, the next thing would be a public presentation on the property maintenance. If we could just, if you'd like, you could, if we could for a second, if I could ask, if we could jump to the public ratification of Resolution 2022-17.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. A resolution to authorize the purchase of real property at 19 East Main Street. Town Administrator, do you have that?
Yes, I do. That is a resolution that actually, if you recall, about a month and a half ago, the elected body was in executive session for negotiations and legal, the possible purchase of land. And at that executive session, you authorized myself and the town attorney to move forward with making an offer on 19 East Main Street, the church. And we did make that offer. The offer was accepted, and we went to settlement on the property on September 7th. You authorized the going forward with that as you're permitted to do under the Open Meetings Act, and we'd just like to have the resolution that was basically adopted read into the minutes or listed here for tonight's meeting.
Would you like to read it, or would you like me to read it, Town Administrator?
Yes, I'm not sure if the town attorney wanted to add anything to that.
No, I don't have anything to add. I just wanted to, we've consummated what you all had directed. So this is just the official act to put it to bed.
Okay.
If you would like to read it.
All right. Resolution 2022-17. I'm going to skip the boilerplates that we all know. Whereas the town is proclaimed as a perpetual entity with the right to pass laws, and whereas the mayor and commissioners believe it is in the best interest of the citizens of Rising Sun to promote economic development and the improvement of the Main Street area through the purchase and revitalization of key buildings and parcels of land for ultimate reuse in the community, and whereas the property at 19 East Main Street, Rising Sun, Maryland, meets the criteria for improving Main Street and is currently for sale, but in a condition that requires significant improvements. And whereas the town desires to make an offer to purchase said property and further authorize the town administrator, as provided by the town code, to execute any and all documents necessary to consummate said purchase. Therefore, be it enacted and resolved that the mayor and commissioners of the town of Rising Sun, that 1, the town of Rising Sun shall enter into a contract of sale for the purchase of real property at 19 East Main Street, Rising Sun, Maryland, for the purchase price of $145,000. The town administrator, Calvin J. Bonenberger Jr., shall have all authority and authorization to execute any and all documents necessary to consummate the said purchase. Now, therefore, day of July 2022, can I get a motion for this?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I guess the one point of discussion would be that we toured the building itself, and it does need significant improvements. We look forward to the ultimate community reuse of this building. It is definitely going to take some time to rehabilitate it. We look forward to working with the state of Maryland and other entities and potentially getting a grant to fix some of the said issues in the building. Ultimately, we are all excited for what this building can do for our community, and we'll have more information as we move through this process. All in favor of Resolution 2022-17?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. Town Administrator.
Yes, Mayor, I'm ready to go back to the public presentation.
Okay. And that's for the property maintenance issues?
Yes.
Okay.
As the board, we've been working on this for, I guess, several years now, and it's been gradually coming to head over the years with the amount of less than desirable circumstances in which we find a lot of rental properties in the town of Rising Sun. As I've reported it at several different meetings, we've actually been drug into some legal cases specifically related to mold and infestations on a lot of different properties. What I wanted to do was, I was asked to put a couple pictures together of the types of things that we run into in dealing with these properties. And if you bear with me for 1 second here. So I'm just going to go through a lot of these pictures here. And some of these are, all of these are situations that we have been able to resolve as a code department, but we've been able to resolve them because, almost like finding a needle in a haystack, we've been involved in some unrelated code issues or have been brought in to look at other things, and we see these blatant issues that exist in some of these rental properties. And I guess, unfortunately, although there are some wonderful landlords,
Can you maximize it?
there are some wonderful landlords in the town of Rising Sun. We also run into occasions where we have some landlords, quite frankly, that are just collecting the money from the tenant. And in many cases, these tenants really don't have any other place to go. They're in Cecil County, but in the state of Maryland in general, more and more communities are moving towards the licensing and inspection of rental properties. But I wanted to give you sort of an overview of what we're seeing. So this is just an example here of where at some point in time the owner of the property decided to bust a hole into what essentially is a bearing wall. And this resulted in us requiring that landlord to get a contractor to come in and do some substantial upgrades because the whole floor joist assembly unit above was just sitting on top of this stone that the owner or somebody at some point in time decided to bust out and do some stuff. This is the kind of stuff we often run into on rental properties, and this sort of comes down to something that we've talked about many times in the past, in that when you are operating as a landlord, in theory, you are opening a business in the town of Rising Sun. It is a business to be a landlord, to make income on property that you own. So you're operating a business. And municipalities don't necessarily sit back and allow your typical businesses, whether it be an office building, McDonald's, a supermarket, a gas station, those business owners have a responsibility to the impact of their property in how it impacts the rest of the community. And in many cases, we find landlords who oftentimes want to throw their hands up and say, well, that's the tenant, what do you want me to do? Well, you're collecting the rent. You have mechanisms made available to you by law to make sure that those property owners do certain things and don't exasperate situations on your property. So we often becomes an eyesore or an issue that we literally get bombarded here in the town of Rising Sun with complaints from people who don't want to live next to those types of situations and doing something about these issues. Here's some properties where just nobody bothers doing any property. And again, this is not necessarily a senior citizen or something that is on a fixed income, and these types of things can be monumental to try to get your hands wrapped around. We deal with those types of things. We're always working with property owners who would like to have a better property, but they might not necessarily have the resources or the wherewithal to figure it out. This is a rental property where the landlord's collecting money on the property, but the property's being allowed to look like that. And we have many cases that are similar to this. Here's another property that we get called into a lot. In this particular case, we really had to play hardball with the tenant, who basically told me, a while back that her husband was not gonna get behind a push mower and mow the grass, and the town could do whatever they wanted. They were not cutting the grass. They didn't feel it was their obligation to cut the grass. So, you know, I've always said this before, that a lot of people think, well, you just go to court on these things. Well, going to court is labor intensive, and it actually costs the town money. And I think it's always important, and I always try to bring people back to this concept. The town of Rising Sun is the residents of the town of Rising Sun, and the residents of Rising Sun are the town of Rising Sun. And what I mean is, we're not just people sitting up here in a building, operating independent of the community itself. We take initiative to do things that protect our residents and make sure that we are spending their money wisely. This, if we go to court, it could actually cost the town a couple $100, maybe thousands of dollars. By the time we, have the attorneys involved and in court, and you might get a $25 high grass citation issued by a judge in that matter. The point being, the town or the town residents are the ones who paid all that money just to get that $25 for this violation, where the landlord has control over this situation. They're running the business in this case. So this is another reason why we need to make sure that these businesses are operating in a good, respectable manner. And I want to make it clear the way a lot of our landlords are already operating. We have great landlords in this community. Sometimes when we go into these properties, we come across situations where obviously they are older properties. Wear and tear is to be expected, but many times the landlord is not really paying attention to this. And I'm going to say this in a manner that might sort of come across odd, but in all the years I've been doing this, I think it's important to drive this point home. If an owner of a property, if the owner of a property, the king of their castle, wants to live in a situation like that, they have the right to do that. We're not regulating owner-occupied properties, but a landlord who is collecting rent from somebody and having those people move in, to me, it's no different than going into the supermarket or any other business and have an expectation that you're not going to be hurt, that your family's not going to be hurt by going into the property. Well, when you have a rental property where the landlord is not paying attention, in this case, we got them to jack up the floorboards down there and put some bracing in there because the floor was collapsing, and the rafters and the joists were starting to show signs of cracking. So these are the kind of things that we're able to do to get some of these properties corrected. Here's another example of that whole stairway was starting to drop down. And, we don't go out necessarily, and it's not something we beat the property owner over the head and make them get engineers to do this stuff. There's some common sense things that you can do. And in this particular case, we had them put 6x6 posts up with, double beams up there. Have them nailed together with basically some gusset plates to have it all rigid in there. And those are the kind of things we try to do to try to keep the property still functioning for its purpose, but functioning in a safe and better manner. In this particular case here, they had to put a footing underneath because it was a dirt floor. And putting a post in there, it actually replaced a post that was already in there that was sinking into the ground. And just simply from a code enforcement standpoint, whenever you are putting a load-bearing post in, it should be on a load-bearing ground that can support that. And so a dirt basement floor where the previous post is already sinking in isn't going to satisfy that. You can see where we had them put some carriage bolts through. We didn't make them tear out the old joists, which would have been a lot of money. We allowed them to sandwich new joists, around that to hold it up. And that's just keeping the property owner safe. This is a rental property here Will the landlord solve the water leakage coming through the light in the bathroom by just shoving plastic, and as you can see, I guess that might be a Wawa bag shoved up into the outlet there. That's the kind of stuff that we see.
Wawa bags will fix anything.
Yeah. Here's a bathroom floor where anyone who has had vinyl tile in their house or in past situations knows that when water gets into that substrate, it starts to turn the tile purple, a purplish color. And that's what you see here, that when you actually walked on the floor, some of the tiles were popping up and the substrate underneath, and for the benefit of the audience, substrate is the plywood or horizontal wood that you put the tile on. That was all spongy. So this is something that we frequently see in some rental properties. Here's some wonderful mold and all growing around a wall mount air conditioner. Again, and the reason why we get called to these on an isolated matter is because the tenant is pleading with the landlord to do something, but the landlord refuses to do it. And so we get called into it. And quite frankly, we don't turn a blind eye to that. Here's some mold around a door jamb. Here's some mold going up the wall by the front door of the apartment, just literally growing right up the drywall. The landlord's well aware of it. Anyone who's familiar with mold knows that's not mold that just happened like 30 days before. That's months and months of accumulation of water getting into the apartment that's creating that mold. Here's some steps on the outside that obviously, in this case, it's an apartment complex. They're not really paying any attention to the steps. There's a lot of elderly that live in here, and the pictures don't really do justice, but if you look really close here, you can see where the tread plate or the face plate is actually separating away from it. So if you're going down the steps, you could catch your foot on that, or if all of your weight were to bear just on the metal kick plate, it could separate and you could fall down the steps here. So that's just another example of some of the stuff that we see on these rental properties. Here's the way some properties decide to keep the outdoor furniture. We get called into it. The landlord says, hey, it's not our problem, and now we're chasing down the tenant here, when in fact, again, the landlord is running a business in town. Here's an example of going through a property, and we find this often, that when the light is illuminated in the center, it's an indication that you have an open ground.
Yeah.
So that means when you're plugging things into these outlets, there's no ground, and you could potentially get electrocuted because the system is not grounded. So this is things that we often find in rental properties also. Someone decided to use their front porch as just storage of whatever they could get on the front porch. Here's a truck that somebody decided to use it as a trash can. And again, there's a landlord collecting rent, making, getting income on these kinds of properties. Here's some mold and mildew coming right underneath the floor in the kitchen area. Here is after the carpet was pulled up. This is the substrate underneath it, how much water it's had over the years in there. Here's some more mold growing up the wall in another rental unit. Here is after we made them take the walls out to get behind or get the mold out of there. This is a framing that's in the wall. Huh?
Can you zoom in?
So this is basically just wood that's been rotted away. That it's not maintaining its recommended structural integrity. Here's some other interesting stuff here with this kind of ductwork all jammed in behind a spare wall in there. Here's some floor rotting above in another unit because the water's coming in. Here's just a drop back view of a laundry room. This is all rotted wood down the wall here. You folks might remember this. This is a one, and I'm going to show the picture later on, that we had to condemn the property right around Christmas time because actually there were snakes in the ceiling. Snakes were coming in from the penetration on the outside, and there were snake nests upstairs, not to mention mice and then all the mold. So the house looks great now because we got the landlord to fix it up. But it's like anything else, you do like a cross sampling and you wonder how many more are out there, especially when you're looking at properties in developments that they're all being used for rental properties and they're all constructed the same way and basically have the same appearance of how they're being maintained. Here's some more rotted wood. Looking up into the ceiling, you can see the evidence of the water running in on the property.
Calvin, since we have a lot to go over,
Okay.
I think the presentation has made its
Okay.
point.
So yes, there's an issue in the community, and we can correct that through the adoption and creation of a rental inspection program.
Do you need to read that into the record, Cal, or how's that?
We previously read it in the record.
It was read into
Yes.
the record at the last meeting.
Okay.
It's an ordinance.
Are we good to move forward with adopting it?
Yes?
All right. Could I get a motion to approve ordinance 2022-03?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Obviously, we've had discussion. Anything further? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you, Town Administrator.
Yep.
Into new business.
We did the annexation agreement. We could now move to the resolution 18A.
Okay, do you have that?
Yes, I do. So, you have the resolution here, and this is an annexation resolution. I'll turn it over to the town attorney for any comments that he wants to make and what the proper procedures are. If we're just reading the boilerplate in, introducing it, or whatever.
So this is, again, a familiar document to you, although this deals with a separate property. And this is what's going to start the annexation time clock. As you know, it takes a time clock where you introduce this to give the public notice that you're doing this, and then it's going to go through a review by the state, by different clearinghouses. There will be a public hearing after a series of advertisements, and then it'll come back to you eventually for adoption or not adoption. So it is boilerplate except for the specifics relating to the property, and you're all very familiar with what the property is. And the town administrator can describe the property, or the key thing on all of this is to look at the exhibit because that depicts what the property is. So it's a long stretch of the roadway and then taking in the southern states one parcel at the time. I don't think you need to read this. It is typical meets and bounds descriptions and boilerplate, but you may want to at least look at the description in the pictorial sense. Any questions I can help answer?
Yes, Jay. This property is being annexed because the Maryland Department of Environment has had a consent decree against them for a environmental violation that occurred back, I believe, 2008 or 2009. Is that correct?
That is correct. The only way that their environmental issue can be solved is if they provide water to the property. The only way they can reasonably provide water to the property is by connecting to the town of Rising Sun's water system. The only way you can allow water to extend to the property is have it be in town, thus the annexation to get it in town. And this is step one. As you recall, the whole thing we've been talking about for 10 years, there are other properties adjacent to this that are also under that same consent order. They are not subject to this annexation. They would be subject to future annexations once this annexation is finalized.
Thank you.
No problem.
Jay, did they have to do any kind of accept it or?
Now, I think that if you just make a motion to accept it and, motion second and vote, that way it'll be in the minutes that it was officially introduced tonight.
I make a motion that we approve the annexation resolution 2022-18A for 881 Telegraph Road in Rising Sun, Maryland, which is the land situated along the 9th election district in Cecil County, described in the deed recorded among the land records of Cecil County in deed book 00222, page 00216, having the physical address of 881 Wilson Road, Rising Sun, Maryland.
And if I can make a point of order before you go with the second, you had stated approve the annexation resolution. Could you amend that to be approved for introduction?
Approved for introduction, sorry.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Accepted. Town Administrator, do you have Resolution 2022-19?
Yes, I do.
Just an amendment. It is, on our agenda, it says fiscal police. It's actually fiscal policy, correct?
What did it say? Fiscal police?
Yes.
Well,
Oh, okay.
on the agenda.
The spell check, got it.
It's just fiscal policy, correct?
It's fiscal policy. Thank you for catching that. So this is a resolution, as you know, from time to time, the way typical municipal governments are set up, you have a charter. A charter lays out certain things that you're able to do as a town. It directs, it creates those concepts, and it refers to the enaction or action or creating of those concepts, either through an ordinance or through a resolution. And in our particular case, the charter refers the management of finances to the town code, and the town code talks about us creating a fiscal policy by resolution. We originally created this fiscal policy around maybe 2011, 2012, and we've amended it from time to time over the years to adapt to changes in government accounting and the way we do our accounting. In this particular document here, and what this comes down to is, as you know, we've gone through a lot of staff changes over the last couple of years to include the fact that we're no longer using a third-party accounting service anymore. We brought that all in-house. So this document often referred to the accountant, and we don't have an accountant anymore. We have a treasurer. So you're going to see things like switching the word accountant to treasurer. We've also taken into account that we have a very robust government accounting software program, MIP, and we make reference to that in here because the old way we used to have to create integrity by receipt books and stuff like that, and have stop gaps that were created by a written policy somewhere. Those stop gaps have actually been created in the MIP software itself. And one of the things you're going to see in here is that we've created some integrity buffers for changing the MIP software or doing something to change a procedure has to go through a checks and balances. And let me just give you, and I think for the benefit of the residents also, the people who handle invoices and the people who open up the mail and the people who produce the checks are not the people that are authorized to sign the checks. And the people who receive money and have that locked up in safes and stuff in town are not necessarily the people that have the ability to go in and do anything with that money. And at times we get donations from people, and sometimes we get gift card donations. We've elaborated on the old way of how it had to be done by paper receipt, of putting some checks and balances in place that the people who receive the gift cards have to get permission from the mayor and town administrator for those gift cards to be used for something. So I guess it's that old 7 degrees from Kevin Bacon, so to speak. We tried to create that 7 degrees of separation in many cases. So basically what we're doing is a resolution to update the fiscal policy manual to bring it up to date.
All right, and you can see, we all have that document in front of us.
Do we have any references specifically to the software, the name of the software vendor, or do we just?
No,
call it the governmental
the
council?
original document had those in there. Judy
Good.
had put them in there. I took those out.
And we just
So
reference the
that- yes.
software, so if you change vendors?
Yes,
Okay, perfect.
yeah. I actually put in there, I believe it was, software designed for government accounting standards.
Yeah.
So any software we get in the future
I
would
didn't
be
see any
the same.
references, I just want to make sure. Okay.
Huh?
I didn't see the references, that's why I was making sure.
Yeah,
All right, can I get a motion to approve Resolution 2022-19, fiscal policy updates and amendments?
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Document is in front of you. Do you have any questions regarding? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you, Town Administrator. All right, moving forward into citizens' input. Would anyone like to speak this evening?
Have we thoroughly confused you?
All right, moving in forward into staff reports. Town Administrator.
okay. A couple of things that I would like to cover is the parking issue and people nodding their head on collisions on Cherry Street. We've got a lot of people concerned about that. We are aware of it. The chief and I are working on some legislation to present to the elected body that will essentially create a 2-hour parking limitation. And I know we've had residents that have said you should eliminate the parking altogether, but one of the things we always have to be careful when you write legislation is that you don't want to create precedent that dominoes into other areas that are unintended. In other words, when you look at the size of this road and the width of the road, it's very similar to other roads we have. So if we were to say no parking period, you would want to have some type of justification on why you are doing that, or somebody could come back and basically say, well, if you did it because the street is XYZ width wide, why didn't you do it on other streets? So that's one issue we got to navigate. I'm not saying that's always the case, but it's something you have to navigate. The other thing is we have a funeral home there that often has overflow parking. We have businesses out on Main Street that rely on their food deliveries, whether it be Bog Total or Rise and Grind, where they need to have a delivery truck be able to pull somewhere, and they can't do that on Main Street. And so to some degree, we got to try to be flexible to be fair to the businesses and the properties that are there while mitigating what has escalated to clearly a public safety issue. So we're going to start by regulating it to 2-hour parking only is a start. That way we don't inadvertently squeeze out the businesses that are in there. We're going to try that first. The other thing that we did is that in talking to the one business there that appears to be the reason for the issues all the time in fixing vehicles, they claim that part of their lease in the parking lot behind the Bog Total, they're supposed to have 4 parking spaces set aside for them. They claim that the vehicles that are in there are not their vehicles. They don't have anything to do with it. When I spoke to the landlord, he said, well, they don't have anything to do with me. They're untagged. I think they are part of that business. So we're in the process of trying to get those 4 spots opened up, which would allow for that business to maybe not have to park vehicles out on Cherry Street. And you step back and look at it from the 10,000-foot view, there's been an auto body or auto repair shop there for decades. And it is very evident that we've never really had that kind of issue on that street. So something has changed, the parameters have changed, something's happening where it's becoming a choke point and a problem. And maybe by getting the 4 parking spaces opened up and get that, the owner of the business using that in a proper manner, in addition to the 2-hour parking on Cherry Street, we're hoping that that will resolve the issue. But we'll continue to monitor it. So hopefully at the next meeting, we'll have the legislative language to turn that into 2-hour parking as a start. Do any of the board members have another idea or something else they would like us to pursue in that? Okay. The other thing that we're working with the engineer on is to get the pricing to do some temporary paving on Pearl Street before the winter months settle in. As I've reported on, the Mount Street Water Project essentially came in at roughly over $1 million more than what was estimated. And as I think I reported at the last meeting, that's just a byproduct of so much infrastructure financing being pushed out into the communities by the president that there's probably more business than some of these contractors can take on. And they are bidding the prices high with the idea, well, if you really want me to do it and I win the bid, it'll really be worth my time to do it because I'll get more money for it. But they're also putting upwards of like 9-month tables to be able to come out because they're backed up. The other unique problem we have, and it's not really unique with this particular thing, is it's not a very large run of water line. So when you start to think about the big name companies that would be able to do this kind of infrastructure project, it might not ring the bell of large enough for them to want to adjust their schedules to try to come in and do it. So we basically put that project on hold for a little bit, but we recognize that we got to get out there and pave Pearl Street, which we have been putting off. The last item I have is the church. As the mayor elaborated on, the town did buy the church, and what we are in the process of doing is, you know, the mayor talked about the amount of damage that's in the building, and it has got a lot of water damage in there. And so we've already started getting pricing for a new roof or to repair the roof on the building, get all the gutters straightened out and fixed up. We want to get the building stabilized so it incurs no more damage. We're also getting somebody to come in and essentially gut the basement out to the studs and the rafters because there's a tremendous amount of mold and mildew that there's no material down there that we're going to be able to use in going forward. So we want to get that all cleaned out of there because that'll actually make it a safer environment for us to start to go in and think about what we want to be doing renovation-wise in the building. The other thing that we are looking at is we know that anything we do with that building is going to necessitate us putting a fire sprinkler system in there. So we're getting the pricing to run a water line behind the building large enough to provide for that fire sprinkler system. But the other thing that we are doing is that we have some properties along Main Street that have some great ideas of things that they want to do that are going to be, you know, really impactful for the town of Rising Sun, but they run into the issue of the fire code requirements. And in order for them to be able to do those renovations, their costs are going to be significantly higher because there is no water main in that area. So we basically want to extend a public water main to that area in a manner that will give those buildings along Main Street the ability to tie into that so that they can more or less spend their money in renovating the building and not spend it on infrastructure piping. In addition to that, we're going to look at, and Augie, I always say you and I go back a long way. Back in 2008 when we were paving Queen Street, we were trying to deal with the water that runs down that alley, but the topos just don't allow us to do anything with it. So in addition to figuring out how to run a water line, we're gonna try to figure out a way to put some storm drain piping in there to take all that rainwater off of the municipal parking lot and in that alley area. And we even have some houses along there that have some really wet yards that there's just nowhere for water on their property to go, and it's going into the basement. We have a property on the end that is looking to spend a lot of money on trying to do some things on their property that may or may not work. So we're gonna look to see if we can't put some kind of stormwater drainage system in that area too, to take care of the water runoff. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Commissioner Pearson, do you have the chief's report?
Chief really has nothing for us at this time. He's away at a Maryland Chief and Sheriff's Association conference, so he didn't pass on anything of importance to me.
All right. Town Attorney, do you have anything for us this evening?
I do. I have a memo that I have prepared and given to Calvin that he's going to discuss with you and distribute later. It is a follow-up from your last meeting regarding the 16 East Main Street project. We've included a lot of research. It's all in the memo, and it's given us some options. So you don't need to make a big motion or anything about this, but when the town administrator briefs you, you can instruct him on how you want to proceed, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Moving forward into the mayor's report. September is a busy month for us. We have obviously our Donate Life campaign that we've done for many years. That is in honor of Benjamin Edward Larson, who tragically died from a motorist pulling out in front of his motorcycle accident. Ben saved numerous lives by just being a donor. 6 people had different organs donated to them. So if you are not a donor, sign up or visit donatelife.org. We also have our Turn the Town Teal campaign, which is in honor of Terry Bader. Terry was the wife of our long-time Public Works employee, Daryl. Terry fought bravely against ovarian cancer, but tragically lost her battle. Those teal ribbons outside are in honor of Terry and in honor of those that are currently fighting ovarian cancer. Couple of events coming up. Spooktacular is obviously October the 8th, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. We have some great events that we are going to have this year. We have added a rock wall that is the largest that I could find, so we are excited about that. We're going to have that as well as bumper cars on Main Street again, along with a few other new events. This afternoon, well, about 5 hours ago, I returned from London. And while I was there, I was able to take a letter from the town to send our condolences to the new king on the death of Queen Elizabeth. I also took a proclamation signed by the county executive and the county council. If you don't know a little bit of history, Cecil County was actually given a charter by Cecilius Calvert back in 1632 by King Charles I. And that is why Cecil County is named Cecil. But I was able to drop off both of those and ran into a MP who was able to get me in touch with the King's private secretary, so we were able to get those to him, so that was very cool. I was just there on my day job and took some time to drop by and dropped off some flowers as well. Moving forward into the commissioner's comments, Commissioner Braun.
I have no report.
Commissioner Pearson.
I have just 2 reminders. One, school's back in, watch for school buses. When that flashing lights come on, you stop. I watched a car go right by it the other day. Second thing is, remember they're gonna be out, the children are gonna be out and about. A request to the children, remember you're waiting for a school bus, don't stand in the street. So that's the end of my report.
Commissioner Warnick.
Only thing I have is we will have some work starting at Veterans Park. Eagle Scout project will be soon commencing. And that is the end of my report.
All right, you can see on the agenda our upcoming town meetings as well as upcoming town events and holidays, our trash, recycling, and yard waste schedule as well. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.